Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. That's right, it's the main one, the 2023 drivers rankings from 20th place to first place. We know I'm going to get them absolutely spot on, so let's delve straight into it. In 20th place, I've gone for Logan Sargeant. I really didn't want to go for Logan Sargeant. It seems like too much of the obvious choice considering he's a rookie driver coming into Formula 1 and he's in a Williams car, but I just think over the course of a season, I don't think it's going to be like a Nicholas Latifi 20th place where he gets absolutely demolished every single Grand Prix. But I do think over the course of 23 races, he's going to end up at the back. In 19th place, I've gone for Nick De Vries. You guys will know from my previous video that I've ummed and ahed over Nick De Vries and whether he's good enough to be in Formula 1, whether or not he's going to do better than Yuki Tsunoda. I think it's going to be very close between him and Yuki, but his lack of experience in Formula 1, coming into this seat for the first time, I think it's just going to play against him a little bit. Plus, that AlphaTauri car looks very difficult to drive. I've got him in 19th. 18th place, I've gone for Alex Albon, the second Williams driver. I think he's going to be, again, kind of nearing the points quite often. I could see him finishing 13th, 14th fairly regularly when people have trouble, when people have issues. He's probably going to be able to pick up some points over the course of the season. I think he's a really, really solid driver for Williams, and I'm so glad they were able to keep hold of him, but I still think he's going to finish in 18th. Which means in 17th place, I've gone for Yuki Tsunoda from AlphaTauri. I feel like this is the time for Yuki Tsunoda to really step up in that AlphaTauri seat. Now, I think it's probably a bit of a shame that the AlphaTauri car looks absolutely dreadful, and I don't think he's going to have that many opportunities to pick up points, but I do think we're going to see the flashes of brilliance from Yuki Tsunoda become more regular and maybe pick up a few points here and there, which will settle him into 17th place. In 16th place, I've gone for Nico Hülkenberg of Haas. He's coming back onto the Formula 1 grid. He is Hulken back all over again, and I'm very excited to see what he can do. I think I've been a little bit harsh on Nico Hülkenberg. I don't think this is the most incredible signing that Haas could have made, but I do think he will be very, very consistent. He will drive incredibly well for that Haas team. He'll pick up points occasionally and therefore land himself in 16th. Just behind his teammate Kevin Magnussen, who I've got in 15th place. Again, I think that Haas car is going to be quicker than the Williams, quicker than the AlphaTauri, but I don't think he's going to be battling for points consistently over the course of the season. I really love Kevin Magnussen. I love the fact that he came back into Haas last year. He was like the superhero, came in that first race, picked up loads of points, but those points kind of carried him throughout the season. I can't see him picking up a 5th place in the first race of the season again and using those points to kind of keep himself elevated in the Drivers' Championship in the way that he did. Maybe another pole position that we can celebrate. We'll see Gunther Steiner absolutely buzzing again, and I'm going to put him in 15th place. 14th place, I've gone for the Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guanyu. I actually thought about putting Zhou a little bit higher than this. I am very positive when it comes to Zhou Guanyu. He got a lot of bad press towards the beginning of last season from lots of Formula 1 fans, but I kind of stood in his corner. I really like Zhou. I think that he could develop into a really, really solid midfield Formula 1 driver, and I think this is the year that he can take that little bit of a step up. He got so unlucky with reliability issues last year. If Ferrari have sorted that reliability out, I can see him being in and around the points a little bit more often and picking up 14th place in the championship. In 13th place, and it pains me to say, I've gone for Oscar Piastri of the McLaren team. I don't think this is a slight on him. We know that Oscar Piastri is an incredible talent. He won Formula 4, Formula 3 and Formula 2 in back-to-back seasons and did testing for Alpine last year where he looked really quick in that Alpine car again. But I just think that this McLaren team are going to struggle this season. I think Oscar Piastri is going to firstly, struggle to adapt to Formula 1. It is going to be a very, very tough 23 race season on Oscar Piastri. And secondly, that McLaren car, we've heard Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, and Daniel Ricciardo all struggle with it at times. To come in your rookie season and adapt straight into that McLaren car is going to be very, very tricky. I feel sorry for Oscar, but I've put him in 13th place. I hope he can do better. I think he'll do better in the future. I think he's one to look forward to. But for now, yeah, I could see this season being tricky. In 12th place, I've gone for the second Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas. And actually, again, with Zhou, I kind of wanted him to go a little bit higher, but I just don't quite know how Alfa Romeo are going to do this season. With the transition into Sauber coming, and obviously Audi's money coming eventually, but not quite yet. Alfa Romeo's money being slowly steeped away. I'm not sure that Valtteri Bottas is going to be able to do the heroics that he did last year at the beginning of the season, which made him finish in the top half of the Formula 1 table, we have to remember. A 10th place finish from Valtteri Bottas was absolutely phenomenal last year. I don't think he's going to be that much slower than he was last year. I just don't think he's going to benefit from the really early start of the season where lots of teams didn't quite have it right. and therefore I've dropped him a couple of places down to 12th, but Valtteri, I really, really love, and I really hope that Sauber keep hold of him for another couple of years. If Audi want him, that's another question, but I think Sauber should definitely keep hold of Valtteri Bottas. Rounding out the bottom half of my drivers' predictions, in 11th place, I've gone for Lance Stroll from Aston Martin, and I'm really excited to see what Aston Martin can do this year, but I just still don't quite believe in Lance Stroll. It's his 7th year in Formula 1, and I know that we've seen like a few races here or there where Lance Stroll's been absolutely amazing, especially in those wet weather conditions, but we haven't really seen him be consistent over the course of a season, or even over the course of like 7 or 8 races in a row, I would argue, and therefore I just don't see him getting that point scoring ability going. You know, you kind of have to build momentum when it comes to Formula 1. If you can get back to back to back points, it just builds like an aura around you where you're almost expected to be in the points every single time around. And I just can't see that happening with Lance Stroll, and therefore I'm going to drop him into 11th place. It's not a terrible season for Lance Stroll, not a terrible season for Aston Martin, but just not convinced for me. In 10th place, I've gone for Lando Norris, Mr. Best of the Rest himself, not quite being best of the rest this time around. In 2022, you could basically put your house on Lando Norris finishing behind the top 6. 7th place was guaranteed to be Lando Norris more times than not. But heading into this season, I still think he is going to be a quality driver. Don't get me wrong, I still think if you look at 2021, 2022, over those couple of seasons, he is arguably the 2nd or 3rd best driver on the Formula 1 grid. And therefore, I just think this McLaren team should be offering him more. They just can't seem to quite click the puzzle pieces together in a way that makes me confident about this season. Nobody seems to be confident about the McLaren. And don't get me wrong, if you look at 2022 in Bahrain, we were absolutely abysmal in testing and in the first race of the season. And then Lando Norris had to overperform, I would say. I think Lando Norris overperformed in that McLaren car, which made Daniel Ricciardo look even worse, who was underperforming. But Lando Norris is going to have to overperform again to that massive level to get anywhere close to where he finished in the driver's standings last season. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that 2nd season in a row with Aston Martin getting better, with Alpine getting better. And therefore, I've slotted him into 10th place. And oh, I hope he finishes higher. 9th place, and my pick is Esteban Ocon. I'm going out on a limb here a little bit. Esteban Ocon has been absolutely fabulous in that Alpine car. He was so incredibly consistent last year, and I know that Fernando Alonso had more of the reliability issues, but Esteban Ocon still put in some incredible midfield performances where he was defending like an absolute king in that midfield battle with lots of different drivers over the course of the 2022 season. Obviously, also picked up a win in 2021. Esteban Ocon has established himself as one of the midfield drivers of the Formula 1 grid. Can I see him going to a Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull and winning a championship? Absolutely not. But I can see him staying at Alpine for the long run and being that driver that they build around and then bring in like a wonder kid at some point to really try and level them up. Esteban Ocon for me, 9th place this season, is exactly par where he should be. Which does mean I've gone for his teammate Pierre Gasly above him in 8th place. Now, all I've just said about Esteban Ocon is absolutely true, but Pierre Gasly just has something about him for me that is ready to be unleashed. I think he's been held back in that AlphaTauri team a little bit. We've seen flashes of incredible Grand Prix from Pierre Gasly since he stepped back from the Red Bull seat to the AlphaTauri seat. Now, it remains to be seen whether that was because the AlphaTauri team could be set up around him. He could be that guy in the AlphaTauri team. I don't think he's going to go straight into this Alpine team and be an obvious number one. I think Esteban Ocon, from being there for a few seasons, from showing that he can do it, is going to have the benefit of the doubt to begin with in this season, is probably going to get things like upgrades first. But Pierre Gasly, just something about him for me. He has that spark, he has that drive, and I think now he's in a midfield car that can deliver points a little bit more consistently. We'll see that quality when it comes to qualifying from him. I think he'll out-qualify Esteban Ocon, and when it comes to those midfield cars, qualifying is very, very important, and if he can get the consistency in the car in the races as well, I think he'll just overperform Esteban Ocon, but I think it's going to be like 5 or 6 points maximum between the two of them. which leaves 7th place, best of the rest, to Fernando Alonso. I honestly think that Fernando Alonso probably would have got 7th place last season in the Alpine car had his reliability not been so bad. I know he reminded us all the time about the points that Alpine had cost him because of reliability issues, and I do think it would have been very, very close between him and Lando Norris as to who would have come 7th place if it hadn't have been for those reliability issues, dropping him back a couple of positions and even finishing behind Esteban Ocon. He was definitely quicker than Esteban Ocon in that Alpine car. I think now he's at Aston Martin. Aston Martin are going to have better reliability. They've got Mercedes engines at least, which seemed to be the most reliable last season and will continue to be. Also, Aston Martin this season, everybody is very excited to see what their race pace is going to be like. In the off-season, there were rumours that they'd made massive steps forward. Over the course of 2022, they made massive steps forward. I'm thinking of the last few Grand Prix, Singapore, Japan, Austin, where that Aston Martin looked really, really strong under Sebastian Vettel. I think Fernando Alonso right now is an upgrade on Sebastian Vettel. I think Aston Martin have also upgraded their car, and this could be a deadly combination where Aston Martin are starting to get towards those top points positions with Fernando Alonso, finishing in the top 5 possibly, you know, breaking into the Ferraris, Red Bulls, Mercedes of this world. Fernando Alonso is going to finish P7. Which leads me into those big boy positions, the top 3 teams, and I've gone for Carlos Sainz to finish in 6th place. I think, again, this is going to be so incredibly close in this top 6 battle. Carlos Sainz, for me, I really wanted to put him higher, but I just think over the course of the 2022 season, as much as he got progressively better, Ferrari still I'm not 100% on. I think their strategy, reliability is still questionable at this point. Maybe they've fixed it. Maybe Fred Vasseur coming in is going to sort everything out and they're going to be absolutely phenomenal over the course of the 2023 season. I could be completely wrong, but I just think it's going to take a little more than a couple of months for Fred Vasseur to really bed in his ideology in that Ferrari team. And also, the strategy thing for me is just such a big thing for Ferrari, and it's such a difficult thing to actually set right because it's a mindset thing, it's a panic thing, and therefore I think Carlos Sainz is going to lose out a little bit to that and come in bottom of this top 6, which seems so harsh, and I love Carlos, and I'm really sorry, but P6. P5, George Russell, Mr. Consistency, Mr. Saturday, whatever you want to call him. He's always a Mr. something. And this season, I think he's going to be Mr. P5. I think he did incredibly well in his first season at Mercedes. He was definitely kind of holding the fort down whilst they tried to adapt Lewis Hamilton's car and figure out what was going wrong with this Mercedes. I do think the Mercedes car is going to be stronger this season. I think it's going to be much quicker than it was last year. But therefore, I also think that Lewis Hamilton is going to be quicker than he was last season. The George Russell-Lewis Hamilton battle, we never really got to see those two go head-to-head on track. I think that's going to happen a little bit more this season. But if you look at it overall, I know Lewis Hamilton ended up with less points, but George Russell was the slower of the two drivers in terms of race pace more often. And if Lewis Hamilton gets the ability to kind of qualify a little bit ahead of George Russell, I think he will then also finish ahead of George Russell more often than not. And therefore, I've kind of got George Russell in 5th place, but I could see him being a little bit higher, maybe a 4th. I just can't see him getting in front of Lewis Hamilton though, and therefore I've kind of had to stick him in this bottom half of the top 6. Mainly because in P4 I've got Sergio Perez, because I still think the Red Bull is going to be incredibly strong. I think Sergio Perez is actually going to improve on what he did last season. I could see him maybe picking up another couple of pole positions, another few wins over the course of 2023. But I do think that the top 3 are going to be much more competitive than they were last year. We saw that even though he was in a Red Bull, he didn't manage to come second in the championship. Charles Leclerc managed to snag that right at the end of the season. Therefore, I just think Sergio Perez just isn't quite at the level of some of these drivers. That is not a slight on Sergio Perez. I think he is an incredibly good driver, and I'm so happy that he is still in Formula One, considering a couple of years ago, it looked like he was going to be gone. Everything that goes with Sergio Perez is just so fun and so wonderful, but I think he's not of the level of the 3 that I've got above him, so I've gone for him in P4. Which means P3, I've got Lewis Hamilton. I kind of talked about him a little bit when I talked about George Russell, but this season just seems like Lewis Hamilton is a little bit more energized, is a little bit more ready to go. He just seems like he's got that demeanor of a Lewis Hamilton that is no nonsense, ready to go. And I don't think the Mercedes will have to adapt their car as much at the beginning of this season as they did last season. That massively cost Lewis Hamilton, where for the first sort of 7, 8 Grand Prix, they were really tinkering with Lewis Hamilton's car. And he was never quite quite 100% happy. I think they maybe will get it right maybe 2 or 3 races into this season, and therefore we're going to see the Lewis Hamilton that we saw in the second half of 2022, where he was just absolutely rattling around. He was so incredibly unlucky not to get a race win. I know that George Russell did get a race win in Brazil, but Lewis Hamilton should have probably picked up a race win somewhere in that second half of the season. He got so many P2s and P3s. It kind of looked like he was back to his racing best. It's just whether or not they can deliver him a car that can also put him at the top of the podium as opposed to second or third. I think he will get wins in 2023, but I think he'll end up in P3, which means I've got a lot of faith in the 2 that I'm putting above him. P2, I've gone for Charles Leclerc. I think, again, it's just going to be close, but not quite good enough for Charles Leclerc in 2023. I think, again, last season, he was the best qualifier, 9 pole positions over the course of the season, but he couldn't translate that into race pace, and there were a few mistakes over the course of the season as well. I'm thinking Imola and France, Japan as well off the top of my head. Like, Charles Leclerc just had a few races where when he was really put under pressure, when he was trying to find that 110% from that Ferrari car, he found the limit. And I think he was put under that pressure really well by Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Like, he basically knew that he had to get more than 100% out of that Ferrari car if he was going to keep himself in the title race. And then when he did push it that little bit too far, he did lose it on a couple of occasions. And we've seen that with all the drivers. You could compare that to Max Verstappen in 2021 when he hits into the wall in Saudi Arabia. When you are trying to fight for titles and you are maybe the second best, you do have to put in that extra little effort, and sometimes it does go wrong. I don't think it's going to go as wrong for Charles Leclerc this season. I do think Ferrari are going to be a little bit better in terms of their reliability, and overall I think Ferrari are going to give a better package to Charles Leclerc, but I still don't think it's quite going to be enough. And the reason I don't think it's going to be quite enough is because I've got Max Verstappen in first place this season. He was absolutely phenomenal last season. The most race wins in a season, the most points in a season. He was just untouchable at points, and I know that Ferrari kind of let themselves down. Mercedes weren't as strong as we thought they were going to be. And I think Max Verstappen had an easier ride of it than we were maybe expecting. I think it's going to be trickier for him this season, but he's won championships in both ways, right? He's won championships where he was massively under pressure from Lewis Hamilton and had to find that extra 1-2%. He had to be on his absolute A game every single Grand Prix. And then he's won a second championship where, let's face it, towards the end of the season, he could have probably let up a little bit and still would have won some Grand Prix, but he didn't let up. I think that's the thing with Max Verstappen. He just always goes for the jugular. He always goes for those wins. He never seems to give up. He is relentless when it comes to his driving ability, and when it comes to just hunting down those records. I think he is going to be as hungry as ever, even as a 2-time world champion. I think he's going to go for it even more so in 2023 because it's going to be more competitive. I'm seeing Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton taking a few wins off Max Verstappen over the course of the season. I think tempers will flare. I think we'll see the Max Verstappen of 2021 when he gets a little bit agitated. But when he gets a little bit agitated, we sometimes see the absolute best from Max Verstappen as well. So I've gone for Max Verstappen being P1 because I just can't see that gap between him and second place being diminished by so much over the course of one season. Maybe 2024, I'll have a little bit of a different idea, but Max Verstappen for me is still the #1 driver on the grid and will finish first and be a triple world champion by the end of 2023. There we have it then, my 1 through 20 for the 2023 season. I'd love to know what you think in the comments down below. Who do you think I've got absolutely spot on, and which drivers do you think I've massively overestimated or underestimated coming into this 2023 season? I'm sure I'm not going to be absolutely spot on. I wasn't last season, but I think I'm feeling pretty confident about this. I really do like it. I've changed my mind about a few drivers, obviously, after the testing, but I think this is a good list. I think this is a good list. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made it, obviously. That makes perfect sense. Whilst you're down there in the comments as well, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you next time.